大家好，您现在正在收看的是由英国蓝鲨集团赞助播映的伦敦政经见地栏目。邓刚教授曾是中国社科院经济研究所的研究员，他在伦敦政经研究中国经济增长已有20余年，探讨中国文人在中国的现代化进程中所扮演的角色，对于我们展望中国以及世界的经济发展又有怎么样的启示呢？ Thank you so much, Professor Deng, for being on our show. Can you please define pre-modern China to those who are not familiar with Chinese history?
Pre-modern China is a very elastic term. The starting point can be anything, say, during the spring and autumn and the warring state period. The ending can be anything around 1750 to 1800 or to 1840, the Opium War. The period is very long, and it is the main body of Chinese history. We call it pre-modern simply because there is no attempt to make China modern. Modern really means commercialized, urbanized, industrialized. So anything without that three elements, we call it pre-modern.
Which group of people in this period are literati?
Right, the literati is a borrowed word from Latin. So the term literati really means those people who can both read and write. Now the literati was a class in China which we call them the Shi or Shidafu class. They are very unique in pre-modern history of the world, simply because in most parts of the Eurasian continent, the main form of organization of a society was feudalism. For example, currently in Britain, we have the queen, we have the dukes, we have knights. These are the titles of the feudal class. Now, if you have a feudalism, then you don't rule the country by civilians, right? Feudal society was organized by feudal lords. The opposite is non-feudal society. So in non-feudal society, who are going to rule society? So this is the issue. Now, when Qin Shi Huang united China, he decided, I'm not going to run my empire with the feudal system for very odd reasons, simply because Qin Shi Huang didn't have any siblings, no brothers. And it's difficult for him to actually appoint dukes and knights, right? So he decided, I'm going to use my army as alternative organizers of society and then see what happened. So this was the ending of the Chinese feudal system and the beginning of the empire. So in an empire system, you need an army of some sort of qualified people to organize society, which won't be necessary if you have feudalism. Now, around the Tang and the Song periods, gradually, not military personnel, but learned people, they are the school graduates or university graduates, start to emerge as the organizer of the society. So we call them the candidate of the Chinese bureaucracy. Now they call themselves the literati simply because they know how to read and write Confucius classics. Now they are not military men, they are just civilians. They come from all walks of society. Very often they come from rural countryside, peasants' families. They produce qualified, sort of talented students. Now, during the Song period, eventually the Chinese examination system started to become the norm, the social norm. So not only you have to go to school and get graduation, you get a piece of paper, but also you have to go to examination centers to get your qualification recognized by the central government. So we all know students hate examinations, but examinations actually were created, invented by the Chinese for actually governance purpose. So we have, after Song, we have 3 degrees. They are imperial degrees. The lowest degree, which is almost like a primary school level, is called Xiucai. The high school level is called Juren, and the university is called Jinshi. So once you get Jinshi, you can wait because the government will call you and give you the office to run. So this is the Chinese way of organizing a non-feudal society. So talented administrators coming from all walks of life, and their titles and their offices cannot be inherited. So every generation will start from the scratch again. So in a way, it is a very expensive way to organize a society. Tokugawa Japan, which was a feudal society, a lot of lords didn't know how to read and write. They didn't need to read and write because they are military leaders. They run a province with a military sort of a fashion. But in China, it's the opposite. The military personnel actually were always the sideline. The main force of the Chinese bureaucracy was organized by the learned people. They are the literati. Yeah.
What caused the rise of illiterati in pre-modern China?
The rise of literati was because of the need for civilian rule. So once you decide, I'm not going to rule China with feudalism, then the only alternative is to find talented people among your general population. So you need to have some sort of selection. It can be, for example, good deeds. You are someone who helps other people. Yeah. Or you have some qualifications. So after 600 years of trial and error, the Umpire decided, let's run imperial examinations. So young people should go to schools, get their qualifications at the 3 levels. Once you finish your university level education, then we give you the job to rule China. We often call pre-modern China a feudal society. In fact, if you know the rule of civilians and the role of the literati, China wasn't a feudal society at all.
What role did literati play in the transformation of pre-modern China's economy?
You need to have a common language to bound people together. That common language in China was actually written language. So that's very important. That is the role for the Chinese, no matter where you're from, to share the same system of communication. So once this is done, you can organize an empire. Otherwise, China will be still a kingdom or groups of kingdoms. During the spring and autumn period, China had more than 100 kingdoms, and gradually the number reduced to 6 and then unite into 1. So the whole process actually is a process of cultural unification. So the literati actually is the embodied symbol of that unity. So I think this is enormously important to organize a society with such a wide range, such a varieties, so many dialects. Secondly, the existence of the literati make sure that China won't go for feudalism. Because imagine if you are the minister, then you pass your post to your son, and your son pass his post to his son, your grandson. So that becomes feudal. Once you do that, guess what? You don't need imperial examinations anymore. So once you have this literati competing for many jobs, so this is actually the mechanism to make sure China is always open politically and administratively for the most qualified people to rule the country. So I think China remained unified, owed greatly to the role of the literati, both politically and culturally.
How did literati influence civilians' lives in agriculture, commercial, and cultural aspects?
The literati actually carried out a set of, if you like, social norms. So in pre-modern China, that social norm is family order, societal order, and the social order all over China. So that's a ideological, political glue to hold people together. The essence of that glue or that ideology was Confucianism. Confucianism emphasizes social order, obedience, and also sharing. So because Confucius' ideas like this, if you organize your family well, then you can use this sort of knowledge and this norm to organize your village and organize your county, organize your province until you organize the whole empire. So it's a kind of from inner of yourself going outer of yourself to benefit society. So that is very important. That is a very important role for the literati. So that's a political, ideological sector of the role of the literati. Economically, the literati actually advise the Chinese government of all levels. For example, typically, how to protect farming. From the Chinese point of view, farming is the most productive, most decent profession. So the literati actually supported wholeheartedly farming. Should other sectors interfere with farming or the health of agriculture, it is the job of the literati to stop it. The idea is not because they like farming in particular. It is because farming will settle people, offer people something to do, and meanwhile they produce food, which is very important for the social stability and the living standards. And thirdly, this is a literati's role, by far the most important role, is to advise the Chinese emperors. You see, in pre-modern China, emperors made decisions, but literati offered the emperor choices. So the emperor will make decisions within those choices. So the emperor often doesn't have an independent choice to make. So the literati advise the emperor. So in terms of the relationship, although the emperor was the master of the literati actually was more superior spiritually than the emperor, because without the literati, the emperor cannot do anything. So spiritually speaking, the supremacy of the literati actually controlled to some extent the emperor's behavior. A good emperor often will leave the literati alone, allow the literati to function as what they have already learned from the Chinese classics. A bad emperor will interfere with the literati. The literati will say, no, you can't do that. Yeah. So this is a kind of a love and hate relationship all the way. Yeah. So the emperor cannot, put it this way, the emperor cannot function without the literati. It's kind of a symbiotic relationship between the two.
How did literati stimulate the process of China's modernization?
Good question. Although the literati form a united front to defend China's unity, to make sure China's economy is functioning, to make sure the emperor doesn't make a lot of mistakes. But however, after 1800, the European influence start to infiltrate Chinese society, especially along Chinese long coast. Yeah. Now, the group of Chinese officials, members of literati, decide to defend China's unity and China's way of life. So they believe foreigners are evil. We shouldn't allow them to influence the way of life in China. But we know opium did come to China in a big way, and once Lin Zexu decided to destroy large quantities of opium, this backfired, and China was invaded, and you have the 1839 to 1840 1-year Opium War. China was defeated. Then China was forced to open her door with 5 ports for foreigners, including opium trade. So another group of literati members decide we can't win this war. We may as well change China. So this is the minority, I have to say. The majority side, China was perfect. Let's defend China and make China independent without foreigners. The other group said, no, China cannot win the war. Let's learn from the West. So this is the beginning of a 30-year-long revolution, I call it. A very mild, very sort of a gradual revolution called the westernization movement, organized by the members of the literati. What did they do? They start to introduce foreign technology. They start to introduce foreign ideology. They start to introduce foreign institutions. Actually, the members of literati were fully aware of colonization by Western powers in Asia. They understood, for example, Vietnam was colonized by France, yeah, and India was colonized by Britain. So they were fully aware of the danger. So learning from the West and turn it around to keep China independent but open was a new way of thinking, right? Then towards the end of the Qing dynasty, we have 100-day reforms organized by a group of highly trained literati members with the support of the Emperor Guangxu. So that was the last systematic approach of reforms. This is also the ending of the 30-year-long westernization movement. So I think they were terribly important.
What was the interplay between literati and the rest of the society?
Good question. Normally, collectively speaking, the literati were the soul of Chinese society. So people look up for them, for opinions, for judgment, for judiciary. So they were a group of super persons, So they should be, politically correct, ideologically correct, and personally, in their manner, they should be the role models of citizens. That's how they should behave. However, we have numerous cases. Individual literati members were not so desirable. So they receive a lot of criticisms from the general public. And the thing is, if you have a bad record, like China's social credit system, you are not to be given any responsibility at any level. So in a sense, there's a sanction in society. So the society can sanction a member of literati from taking any political decisions or economic decisions. So that is very important in Chinese, interplay between the general public and individual literati members. So not only you should have 3 degrees in hand, but also you should behave. You should be seen as well-behaved citizen, a role model. And secondly, individual officials, once they become officials from literati, then they have to watch each other. Watching each other is part of their duty. If they manage to find a fellow member of officials guilty of, for example, corruption, if you do not report it, then you'll be punished the same crime as your fellow official. If you report the crime on time, you'll be promoted. So this is what we call meritocracy inside the bureaucracy among these members of the literati. So in a way, the bureaucracy itself serves like a specialized society. So individual literati member need to fit himself in. So this is a very unique kind of an organization to watch people's behavior from their back, to make sure, by and large, corruption was checked. I believe, normally speaking, most of the cases, Chinese corruption in the bureaucracy was actually controlled. Not completely eliminated, but certainly the corruption was controlled. And the last point is the relationship between the emperor and the individual officials. Now, we often say China run an absolute monarchy. The emperor can decide whether you're going to live or whether you're going to die. True, the emperor certainly had enormous power over any individual, including individual official. That's absolutely true. But collectively, as I said, the emperor was subject to advisory of his bureaucracy. Otherwise, he can't function. So in that sense, individual officials may be powerless, but collectively they actually control the emperor. So this is another way to look at how individual members of the literati behave and how they actually fit in different sort of levels of society, different levels of organizations. So I think, put it this way, if you take the umpire away from the equation, the umpire still runs. But if you take the literati away from the equation, China as an umpire will collapse.
一个国家的国民经济在自然状态下高速发展的时候，要改革非常困难，仅靠民众自发的力量常常不成功，而是需要文人以及精英的力量和国家的力量来重新整合经济的结构，改变过去的经济轨道，改变路径依赖。感谢您收看本期由蓝沙集团赞助的伦敦政经见地栏目。